Well, let's get some analysis on all of this now with the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative, Mustafa Barghouti. He joins me from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thank you, as always, for speaking to us. First, I'd like to get your take on the talks that were held on Thursday and Friday. After those initial talks, there was this cautious optimism from the United States, particularly President Biden. But do you think these latest meetings are actually moving everyone closer to a concrete deal for a ceasefire?
Unfortunately, there are lots of doubts still about this issue for two reasons. One reason is that the American proposal took into consideration Israeli changes of what was proposed by President Biden himself before. These changes are risky because they could undermine the whole possibility of a ceasefire. The second reason is that Netanyahu does not stop changing his positions and does not stop his efforts to undermine the agreement. And he keeps leaving gaps in the process of unresolved issues, each of which could become an undermining component that could destroy the possibility of a ceasefire. So we don't trust Netanyahu. We don't trust that he wants a ceasefire. And of course, he's doing that in contradiction with the majority of the opinion of majority of Israelis, but also in contradiction with his own security structure, including the army, which really wants a ceasefire. So who will win in this case? It depends on whether the United States of America will have the guts and the ability and the courage to pressure Netanyahu to stop his maneuvers and allow an agreement to take place.
Well, we have Antony Blinken visiting the region again. He's arriving in Israel later on Sunday. Could his presence there affect Israel's decision-making, which so far, as you've just laid out, it hasn't done much to change Netanyahu's mind? But the U.S., of course, has the ability to make this ceasefire happen and for this war to end.
Well, it depends on whether Mr. Blinken will make any effort really in pushing the Israeli position to accept a ceasefire. So far, each time he came and visited the area, the results were unfortunately very negative. So if he takes the position of being totally biased to the Israeli side, as he did before, we will not see progress. And if Biden wants to see a difference, I think he should himself call Netanyahu and tell him enough is enough. The situation in Gaza is absolutely disastrous. And if Netanyahu insists on his maneuvering, we could see this area going into a terrible regional war very soon.
Well, was Israel feeling that pressure, or at least from the domestic side of Israelis and the army, as you pointed out, and then with the situation in Gaza getting worse every day, the rising death toll, the mass displacement, the rising number of diseases there, is Hamas also feeling some pressure to also bring about a ceasefire?
Yeah, and Hamas wants a ceasefire. They have always wanted a ceasefire. I mean, but they don't want a ceasefire that is only temporary, and then the Israeli army would renew its attack, as Netanyahu wants. Then that does not make sense, because then we don't have a ceasefire. We just have a pause so that the killing could continue later after the Israeli army had time to reorganize and take a rest and so on. So that's not what we want, and that's not what Hamas wants. And on the other hand, what you've just described is very accurate. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is horrible. And I don't know how the world could allow Israel to squeeze 1.6 million people, of displaced people, to displace them again with artillery bombardment, with airstrikes, and force 1.6 million people to be in a very small strip that the size of which does not exceed 24 square kilometers or 15 square miles. This is so horrible. These people are without shelters, without food, without medicine, without water. And as you said, Israel is conducting also a biological warfare. We have now no less than 76,000 people with infectious hepatitis. We started to see poliomyelitis, which is very dangerous. Children started to have poliomyelitis, a disease that we managed to eradicate in previous years, and it is appearing today again. We even have cases of meningitis. Thousands and thousands of children are affected with skin infections. And the total number of people who are having sickness is 1.6 million. This is awful, and this has to stop. And it cannot stop unless there is a total and complete ceasefire and without allowing the people to go back to the places they have been displaced from.
And hopefully we will see a ceasefire very soon because it is so desperately needed. As you say, Mustafa Barghouti, always good to get your take. Thank you very much.
Thank you.